and a very warm welcome to a brand new edition of Frank Talk. I'm frankrausanpereira. This is Bharata First, and I have a very special guest with me on the program today. He's a scholar, a career diplomat. He's held the highest positions as far as India's representatives to countries like Myanmar, Mexico, South Africa, and Kenya. He was the ambassador and high commissioner there. He is also a distinguished fellow at the Gateway House. It's a pleasure to welcome on the program Ambassador Rajiv Bhatia. Ambassador, welcome, and it's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you so much. This is my return presence here at your very prestigious platform. I congratulate you on what you have already achieved. And I feel very honored that I'm here once again with you.
Thank you so very much, Ambassador. So the reason the Ambassador is here today is to talk about his book. Of course, he has authored a book on Myanmar as well. And this is another book that he has authored on India-Africa relations, changing horizons. So Ambassador, if you could, show us a copy of the book so that we can,
yes, indeed, with great pleasure. This is the new book published by Routledge, which is a very prestigious international publishing house. Three things are important. One, the mask you are seeing. It's a mask we bought some 25 years back in Mombasa, Kenya. So the mask on the cover represents Africa. And then you see the lotus, specially designed for the cover. This represents India. And the blue tinge is the Indian Ocean. So India and Africa are neighbors across the ocean. And that is the fundamental theme of this book.
Lovely, lovely. It looks amazing. So much of thought that has gone into it as well. And the cover itself tells such an amazing story. I can't wait to see what's inside really and go through it. So Ambassador, let's start with, what brought you to actually penning this book? Why did you decide to write on this subject?
The reason I think is twofold. Unlike many other diplomats of other countries who consider themselves as masters of the universe, I have been a professional throughout, and I feel that I should speak and write only about those countries or regions where India gave me the chance to serve. And the second thing is that even though one has been to 9 different countries, you then end up focusing on a continent where one served for a longer period. So I spent, as you said right in the introduction, 7 years as India's High Commissioner in Kenya, which is in Eastern Africa, and then South Africa, which is in Southern Africa. That is total 7 years on the African continent. And then after my superannuation from the Indian Foreign Service, I had a great opportunity to head the Indian Council of World Affairs, which is the official think tank of the Ministry of External Affairs. This think tank is particularly devoted to the study of Africa. So I was very active there. And since then, for the past 6 years, my association with Gateway House, located in Mumbai, has also enabled me to look at Africa in depth. So put together, I felt that the fruits of one's labor for love focused on India-Africa relations should be shared widely with people in India and abroad, hence this book.
Sorry, I was on mute. Wonderful to hear. Wonderful to hear that, Ambassador. So, as far as the book itself is concerned, it's interesting that you spoke about the blue tinge representing the Indian Ocean. And there is a big connection really as far as the Indian Ocean is concerned. Over the past, we seem to have neglected some of those very crucial, important islands, African island nations in the Indian Ocean. But over the last couple of decades, we've seen that even those island nations have been given their due. We've been focusing on the island nations as well. So from a strategic point of view and from a geopolitical point of view, how important are these islands?
Very important indeed. Mauritius, Seychelles, Mozambique, Madagascar. So these are islands located between India and Africa. And history tells us that in the ancient and medieval times, Indians went through these islands onto the African continent. The other parallel route they took, the Indians, they sailed in small boats from Gujarat and then went through the Arab route onto the eastern flank of Africa, that is Kenya. So fundamentally, the Swahili language, which is spoken in much of Eastern Africa, has words that indicate the old Indian connection. So fundamentally, while you are right, in the last few decades, somehow Africa and India in mental escape drifted away. But our history on both sides is full of facts and stories about this great connect between India through the Indian Ocean and through the Arab route with Africa. And we need to really sensitize our young generation about this very rich and very important connection.
Absolutely. Since we're here, then, Ambassador, this is a quick follow-up question on this. We keep hearing of Indian goodwill, or the goodwill that India has everywhere, be it Afghanistan, be it West Asia now, or anywhere in the world. It's because of the kind of work that we do, and it's because there's no real baggage attached. As far as historical ties are concerned, because, we've got like ties with Africa going back a few thousand years. So do we have that goodwill even in Africa?
So I think the answer will have to be yes, but we have to be also candid to point out some negativity. I think that will be the honest way to look at it. So even if we fast forward from the ancient and medieval time to the modern period, we know that the British Raj, took a large number of Indians to Africa to work on economy there, because they wanted to exploit the rich dividends of Africa for Europe, for Britain. So when Indians went riding over the shoulders of the British Raj, they were instantaneous success there as workers, as traders, as professionals. But they were also seen as agents of the British Raj. They were also seen as the agents of colonial ruler. So there was positivity, but certain negativity from the viewpoint of the blacks of Africa. Yet over a long period of time, Indians worked hard. They contributed to the African nations where they stayed, and they made a name for themselves as members of cabinet, members of parliament, members of industry and business. For example, when I was in Kenya, it was said that 100,000 Indian origin people contributed to probably 50 or 60% of the GDP of Kenya. So goodwill is there, but then again, fast forward to the modern period even further, India achieving independence through peaceful means under the leadership of Mahatma Gandhi created a major impact on African nations. Then during the period of the non-aligned movement, Jawaharlal Nehru and other African leaders and Asian leaders worked together to find the third way between democracy and communism, between American-led camp and the Soviet Union-led camp. And finally, when it came to the question of sustainable development in the present century, once again, India and Africa found themselves working together on the same side. So through history, we can say there is affinity, and therefore there is largely goodwill, abiding goodwill for India in much of Africa.
Let me go back to the title of your book, Ambassador, India, Africa, relations, changing horizons. So what are the changing horizons, and, how have you captured that in your book?
Thank you so much. That's a very perceptive question, if I may say. So this is a slightly different portrayal of this conventional thesis, India-Africa relations. Many people have written about it. My submission is that first of all, we should look at this relationship in the context of the changes that are taking place in Africa. Africa today is not Africa of the 19th or 20th century. Africa has transformed itself to a large extent. There are more democracies in Africa today than they were in the past. There are many African economies which have been developing very well, at least until the COVID era began. And Africa is heading towards regional cooperation and integration. And the African continental free trade area has also been structured. So first of all, I speak about the transitions and changes in Africa. The second aspect is that the world's approach towards Africa has changed greatly. Earlier, much of the world used to neglect or ignore Africa, barring the old colonial rulers such as Britain, France, Netherlands, Spain and Portugal, and Belgium. Now, my study shows that countries from Brazil in Latin America to UAE in West Asia, countries from Australia and Indonesia to other Asian countries, they are seriously competing with each other to develop relations with Africa. And specifically flowing from the second theme is another chapter which I devote fully to what I call Africa-China Tango. China has come to be a major partner of Africa. And so all these reasons, changes in Africa, the international competition, and China's growing footprint make it absolutely essential for India to take greater interest in Africa and to develop this relationship further.
Taking greater interest in Africa, let me take that particular aspect forward with you, Ambassador. Is it better that we do it bilaterally with the African nations, or should we take on like-minded partners like maybe, Israel, United Arab Emirates, Japan, and so many other countries and even, the EU member states who genuinely want to do so much more in Africa? Do you believe that that would be a better model, or do we look at bilaterals?
I'm a believer that we should not exclude any option, because India needs to work much more than in the past to secure a better position for itself in Africa. And therefore, you are absolutely right. It reflects your very deep understanding of international relations, that trilateral cooperation, that is India working with a like-minded partner to promote our common interests in Africa. This is what is called trilateral cooperation. This should be attempted all the time. It is being attempted also, still with limited results, but it is important to do that. At the same time, India has to devise a policy which responds to Africa at three different levels. Africa is not a country, as we know. Africa is a continent with 54 countries. So first of all, the first level, India has to deal with Africa at the continental level by devising closer relationship with the African Union, which is the one regional grouping where all 55 members are there. Secondly, there are different regions, as we know, north, south, east, west, center. So India must have a policy to deal with each of the regions because they have their own unique characteristics. And finally, at the third level, purely bilateral approach is also required. India must not have just one Africa policy. India needs to have 54 different country policies so that we know that Kenya is in Eastern Africa, but Senegal is in Western Africa. And they are as far apart as New York to California.
Absolutely. It's interesting that, we are speaking about this. Let me just quickly bring in another aspect related to this as well. Up until, before the 2000, in the previous century, we focused heavily on South Africa, and Africa was equal to South Africa and not beyond that, despite us having historical ties with East Africa and several of the other African nations. But that seems to have changed now, at least over the last couple of decades. We've been focusing on the eastern coast of Africa. We've been focusing on the western coast of Africa, and we've been focusing on North Africa as well. What has brought about that change? And isn't it a good change?
Very perceptive question again, if I may say. I was posted as your High Commissioner in Kenya when South Africa emerged as a new independent democracy after the end of the apartheid. And for the first few years, that is from mid-90s to the end of 90s, Indian diplomatic effort was so heavily concentrated on South Africa that other countries were beginning to feel neglected. And I sensed that sitting in Nairobi. There were many more visits being exchanged between Pretoria and Delhi than between India and the whole of Eastern Africa. So that was the time of Nelson Mandela. That was the time of Africa's Gandhi. And therefore, the whole world understood the great significance of the emergence of South Africa. But since then, in the last 15 years, the situation has changed. India has realized that while South Africa is one of the two largest economies, there is no doubt that other countries are important. India needs oil. So it has to go to oil-rich African countries such as Nigeria, Mozambique, Angola. India realizes that North Africa has a special significance in terms of connections with Europe. So India goes to North Africa. East Africa has been traditionally the bastion of Indian activism. So that is also important. And then, of course, Central Africa as well. So yes, you are right. The footprint is broadening, but still it has to be selective because India does not have unlimited resources which can be thrown at all 54 countries in one go.
Very true. Very true. Ambassador, you spoke about the China angle. Now let's dwell upon that a little deeper. As far as China is concerned, there are many nations within Africa too who are worried about China's debt trap diplomacy. Now, how big a concern is that, and can we, along with another partner, we were speaking about trilaterals or trilateral cooperation just 5 minutes ago. So can we be an alternative really to China in Africa?
Yes, concern is there. Concern arises from Chinese bringing their own labor, bringing technology in pamphlets and books which are written in the Chinese characters. They give debts, and then if you don't pay the debts, they plan to take away your assets, national assets. So all those things are there. In terms of, facing competition with China, that is also a stark reality. I wanted, until I began to write the book, I used to feel that when I want to talk about India, Africa, I do not want to give free publicity to China. But then my well-wishers told me that until you include a chapter on China in your book, it will not be treated with the respect that it deserves. So I heavily researched this chapter, and it's a very important chapter in the book. My basic thesis is that China has undoubtedly done a lot for Africa. Roads, bridges, big projects, a lot of money spent there, loans given, infrastructure development, human resource development. But there are three different views very quickly. One that, which claims that China has been generally positive for Africa. The other which claims that no, as you said earlier, China's negativity is coming through very clearly. But the third view should be taken seriously. Third view is that there are some positive factors about China's presence, but there is negativity as well. So then we end up asking ourselves as to what Africans are saying. You rightly said Africans are critical, but a majority of African opinion, influencers and makers are still largely positive on China. Why? Because they say that we need so much of resources for our development that we would welcome them from anywhere where it comes. Its only important thing is that China's agency China's autonomy, Africa's agency and Africa's autonomy should be respected. So for us, to me, the key takeaway is that Indian scholars, Indian authorities must seriously examine what China's pattern has been in Africa, and then draw right lessons for us to design our own Africa policy. And I think this is what we are doing.
Talking about our own African policy, Ambassador, what should it entail? What should our key focus areas be?
I think we began very well after independence, when India fought shoulder to shoulder with Africa to secure their independence, and then to secure their independence in foreign policy through non-alignment. But through the 80s and 90s, we lost time. We had our own, challenges to handle domestically, and there were other foreign policy priorities. So eventually, in about last 15 years, India has regained its momentum for Africa policy. Africa policy is very simple. We want to deepen political, economic, social, cultural, technological, and scientific relations and partnership with Africa. And for this, India hit upon a great idea of the India-Africa Forum Summit. 3 summits have taken place. India set aside a lot of financial resources, which have in turn created new projects in Africa. 50,000 African trainees have been trained at Indian institutions, and India is doing a lot of things. More importantly, even Indian leaders have found time more and more to go to Africa and understand their people and their problems. My only issue today is that COVID has somewhat weakened this momentum. In the last 3 years, we had to tackle and manage this challenge of the pandemic at home. It has also affected our economy. But happily, we are now getting out of that dark phase. And so my plea through this book is that as we regain our equilibrium, we must recapture that momentum centered on Africa.
Yes, the pandemic, of course, has thrown the spanner in the works, so to speak, as far as countries around the world are concerned. And that momentum that we saw, a few years ago on the Africa-India relationship seems to have come to us to a halt, so to speak, at least to a temporary halt. But the horizons, of course, are bright. The future too is bright. So, Ambassador, since we are here, before I let you go, what's the best way forward, really, as far as India-Africa relations are concerned?
Of course, for details, you will have to fulfill your resolve and read the book. But I'm very happy to share the essence of my proposal or my plan. I think India needs, first of all, a greater political will. This was displayed during the period 2015-2019. So the same political will has to be now further strengthened. And the best way to do this is to hold the next India-Africa Forum Summit soon, ideally in a physical form. And if for some reason it is not possible to do so, then in the digital form. I think if President Biden can hold a digital conference of 117 democratic nations, surely India can hold a much smaller conference of 54 countries. Second element is India needs to set aside and allocate new resources for building up the economies and the economic partnership with African countries. We had set aside funds, but they all have been exhausted. We need more funds. And the third thing is that outside the government, business communities, and the third space, that is universities, youth, media, think tanks, academia, they all need to be enthused and more deeply engaged in developing the relationship with Africa.
Very true. Absolutely. Ambassador, lovely having you on the program. Thank you for sharing those, excerpts from your book with us. And thank you for taking us through what is there within the book itself. Can't wait to buy my copy and, go through it and ask you some follow-up questions, maybe, later on, and discuss the book itself and discuss India-Africa relations. For those of you who want to get a hold of the book, it's available online. It's available on Amazon as well. And you can always pick up your book online and get a copy and go through it as well to understand India-Africa relations better. The book, of course, is titled India-Africa Relations, Changing Horizons. We've got a preview into the book. Go out there, buy the book and go through it so that you understand the whole gamut of the relationship between India and Africa. Ambassador, pleasure having you on the program. Thank you.
I'm really thankful to you. All that I can say in the end, my book ends with the famous 2 lines of a Cameroon proverb, Waka Waka, this time for Africa. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Ambassador. Pleasure having you here.
Thank you.
That's all the time we have on this edition of Frank Talk. See you again next time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.